Devoted to Putin's policy of conquest by occupying neighboring independent states and sympathizing with collaborators, former Ukrainian and now temporarily Russian citizens seem to be beginning to learn the art of insight from the so-called SVO. Despite threats to be prosecuted under the criminal article on fakes about the Russian army, many appeals related to the impoverishment of the Russian people due to the war are appearing on the internet. Ukrainians from Melitopol, Mariupol, Crimea and Donbass, having forgotten about fear, are even recording appeals to Putin. Residents say they are fed up with the lies of Putin's government, and Putin is increasingly criticized. Not only regional media controlled by local authorities, but also federal media outlets, which publish a cry for help from those fleeing from Banderites in search of a better life, cannot remain on the sidelines. In the story of a Russian propagandist filmed in a camp of refugees from the Ukrainian Popasna who risked going somewhere after a full-scale invasion and destruction of their city by Russian occupiers, ended up in the wrong conditions. Now all that remains is disappointment after such a liberation of Donbass by the Russian world. Earlier, media reported that the Russians declared thousands of houses in Mariupol abandoned, although in fact this housing belongs to Ukrainians who died or became refugees during the siege of this city 3 years ago. It is worth noting that the Russian authorities have wanted to get their hands on the housing abandoned by Ukrainians for a long time. Thus, in the summer of 2024, the local administration recognized about 5,700 houses or apartments as ownerless and therefore subject to seizure. According to an investigation by BBC journalists, the vast majority of these apartments or private houses belonged to Ukrainian citizens who died in Russian bombing in 2022 or fled the city. By the way, according to the calculations of the international organization Human Rights Watch, at least 8,000 residents of Mariupol died as a result of the bombings by the Russian armed forces. According to documents analyzed by BBC Verify, in addition to the 2,200 apartments, more than 3,500 residential properties are being prepared for forced nationalization and are listed as potentially confiscated, that is, ownerless. In fact, the Russian authorities require registration under Russian law, but residents of Mariupol with Ukrainian passports who left the city simply cannot do this.
Yemen's Houthi rebels aired footage on Friday they said showed the debris of an American MQ-9 Reaper drone. According to Associated Press, the footage showed burning wreckage of what the rebels described as an MQ-9 Reaper drone shot down in Yemen's capital Sana'a. A U.S. airstrike on an important oil port held by Yemen's Houthi rebels killed more than 70 people and wounded many others, the Iranian-backed rebel group said Friday, marking a major escalation in the military campaign President Donald Trump launched against the faction last month. The overnight strike on the Ras Isa port sent massive fireballs billowing skyward and turned tanker trucks into burning wrecks. It was the first American attack on a Houthi-controlled oil facility since the U.S. began its new bombing campaign. It was the first American attack on a Houthi-controlled oil facility since the U.S. began its new bombing campaign. It also came just before the resumption of negotiations in Rome between the US and Iran over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program, which Washington has linked to its Yemen campaign. The US is targeting the Houthis because of the group's attacks on shipping in the Red Sea, a crucial global trade route, and on Israel. The Houthis are the last militant group in Iran's self-described axis of resistance that is capable of regularly attacking Israel.
هذه الطائرة MQ-9 التي تخطط في أجواء مديرية النظر والتي تمكنت الدفاعات الجوية اليمنية من إسقاطها.
Yemen's Houthi rebels say U.S. airstrikes targeting oil port killed at least 74 people and injured at least 171 others. According to Associated Press, the overnight strikes on the Ras Isa port sent massive fireballs billowing skyward and left mangled fuel trucks burning. It was the deadliest known American attack yet in U.S. President Donald Trump's military campaign against the Houthis, which began March 15. The U.S. Military Central Command declined to comment when asked about civilian casualties.
A U.S. airstrike has targeted an oil port in Yemen held by its Houthi rebels. This is the most serious and deadliest attack publicly known in this month-long campaign waged by the Trump administration against the group. This attack targeted the Ras Isa port in Hadida. It saw basically massive plumes of fire and smoke rise from the site early in the morning. It destroyed fuel tankers lined up there, and rebel-controlled television aired just gruesome photos of those killed in the attack. Satellite images analyzed by the Associated Press afterwards show oil tanks destroyed, vehicles destroyed, and crude oil apparently leaking into the Red Sea. Now, the U.S. military has acknowledged this attack. They say they targeted the facility to stop the flow of oil and fuel products into Yemen to squeeze the Houthi rebels. The rebels themselves have called this a major crime against them and have threatened retaliation. All this comes as the United States is now negotiating with the Houthis' main benefactor, Iran, over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. Those talks are set to be held Saturday in Rome, and it's likely that this attack in Yemen may be part of a Trump strategy to try to squeeze the Iranians and squeeze members of their so-called axis of resistance.
تقوم بنقل جثث الشهداء المتفحمة إثر غارات العدو الأمريكي.